The year is 1606. The streets of Rome are a chaotic symphony of shouting and the clash of steel. Under the flickering torchlight, two men face each other, swords drawn. One is Ranuccio Tommasone, a well-known gangster. The other is Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio, the most famous and controversial painter in the city. A duel over a gambling debt, or perhaps a woman, escalates. A blade flashes. Tommasone falls, bleeding out onto the cobblestones. In that instant, Caravaggio, the celebrated artist, becomes a murderer on the run. The man who painted saints with the faces of street beggars was now a hunted criminal. How did the most revolutionary painter of his time become the most dangerous man in Rome? To understand the man, you must first understand his art. Before Caravaggio, religious painting was idealized, ethereal, and distant. Saints were flawless figures, bathed in a divine glow. But Caravaggio dragged divinity down to earth. He picked up his brush and painted what he saw in the gritty baccales of Rome. His revolution was realism, a brutal and unflinching honesty that shocked the establishment. He pioneered a technique called chiaroscuro, using extreme contrasts of light and shadow. Light doesn't just illuminate his scenes, it slices through the darkness, revealing a single, dramatic moment frozen in time. Look at the calling of St. Matthew. A beam of light cuts across a dark, grimy tavern, and Christ, half hidden in shadow, points toward a stunned tax collector. It's not a divine spectacle. It's a moment of spiritual awakening happening in a place you or I could walk into. His figures weren't idealized models. They were the poor, the aged, the sex workers he knew from the streets. In his Death of the Virgin, Mary is not a serene queen ascending to heaven. She is a real dead woman with a swollen belly and pale, lifeless skin. The apostles around her aren't stoic figures. They are broken men, weeping openly. Rome was horrified. The church that commissioned it refused to hang it. They said he painted the Mother of God to look like a common drowned prostitute, and they were probably right. Caravaggio wasn't just painting stories, he was painting truth, raw and uncensored, and this truth made him both a genius and an outcast. But where did this obsession with darkness and suffering come from? To find the roots of his violent temper, we have to go back to his childhood. He was born in Milan in 1571, a time of plague and constant warfare. His world was shaped by death from the very beginning. The plague swept through his family, taking his father, his grandparents, and his uncle when he was just a boy. Orphaned and alone, he grew up in a brutal, violent society where sword fighting was common and life was cheap. This early exposure to trauma and instability likely forged a deep-seated volatility in his character. He learned that the world was a dangerous place, and survival meant being tougher and more aggressive than the next man. This wasn't just a tough childhood, it was a psychological forge, creating a man who was hypersensitive to any slight, quick to anger, and perpetually ready for a fight. The darkness he would later paint wasn't an artistic choice. It was the world he had always known. As his fame grew in Rome, so did his rap sheet. The man who could paint the most sublime moments of religious grace had a temper that was anything but divine. Historical records are filled with his transgressions. He was constantly getting into street brawls, often over trivial matters. One report details him throwing a plate of hot artichokes at a waiteress' face because he felt they were UN cooked to his liking. He was arrested for carrying a sword and dagger without a license, a privilege reserved for noblemen. He was sued for libel by another painter, claiming Caravaggio and his friends had written and distributed offensive poems about him. He was involved in assaults, nighttime brawls, and was known to roam the streets with a gang of other hot-headed artists and swordsmen looking for trouble. His arrogance was legendary. He believed he was the greatest painter alive and was savagely intolerant of any criticism. This explosive combination of pride and hypersensitivity meant he was a walking powder keg. Every insult, real or imagined, was a spark that could set him off. For Caravaggio, honor was everything, and he would defend it with his fists or his blade. His art became a confession. If you want to understand Caravaggio's mind, you don't need a psychologist. You just need to look at his canvases. His paintings are a direct reflection of his inner turmoil. His obsession with violence is on full display. Look at his Judith beheading Holofernes. This isn't a heroic, clean depiction of the story. It's gruesome. The blood spurts, Holofernes' eyes roll back in agony, and Judith herself seems a mixture of determination and revulsion. He painted beheadings again and again, like in David with the head of Goliath, where the severed head of the giant is a self-portrait. It's a shocking act of self-incrimination, a confession of guilt painted for all to see. The artist portrays himself as the monster, deserving of his fate. He used the faces of criminals, prostitutes, and the down and out as his models for saints and martyrs, blurring the line between the sacred and the profane, just as he did in his own life. His work is filled with themes of guilt, punishment, and the desperate hope for redemption. His paintings weren't just art, they were his diary, a visual record of a soul at war with itself. After killing Ranuccio Tommasoni, Caravaggio's life unraveled. With a death sentence on his head, he became a fugitive. He fled Rome, starting a desperate journey through Naples, Malta, and Sicily. But here's the paradox. During this period of constant fear and paranoia, he produced some of his most profound and moving masterpieces. He was a man hunted, looking over his shoulder, yet still creating art that would define an era. Imagine the psychological tension. Celebrated as a genius in one city, only to have to flee in the middle of the night. He was knighted in Malta, only to get into another brutal brawl, get imprisoned, and then escape, making him a fugitive from the Knights of Malta as well. He lived his final years in a state of perpetual crisis, painting darker, more frantic works while desperately trying to secure a papal pardon that would allow him to return to Rome. In the end, the pardon came, but it was too late. On his way back to Rome, in the summer of 1610, he died alone on a feverish beach in Porto Ercole, just 38 years old. The exact cause remains a mystery perhaps. Malaria, perhaps an infection from a wound, perhaps even murder by his enemies. The tragic paradox of Caravaggio is that he gifted the world a new vision of artistic truth, a way of seeing the sacred in the raw reality of human life. Yet, he himself could never escape the shadows of his own violent nature. He brought an unmatched humanity to his paintings, but struggled to find peace within his own humanity. Perhaps Caravaggio didn't just paint light and shadow, he was made of them, and he lived his entire, brilliant and tragic life trapped between the two. Thank you for watching. If you want to explore more stories where art and history collide, be sure to subscribe.